Contemporaries who saw Anne Boleyn left mixed reports of her looks. Even her admirers admitted Anne wasn't a classic beauty, noting she was striking but not beautiful. Whereas her sister Mary Boleyn was considered the family beauty. Many descriptions focus on Anne's arresting dark features. In 1532, a Venetian diplomat observed that Anne was of middling stature, with a swarthy, olive-toned complexion, long neck, and wide mouth, bluntly adding she was not one of the handsomest women in the world. However, he conceded she had eyes, black and beautiful, which take great effect on those around her. Those dark, expressive eyes would be a running theme in accounts of Anne, often cited as her most captivating feature. Not all contemporaries were so restrained, especially Anne's enemies. Eustace Chapuis, the imperial ambassador and a staunch supporter of Catherine of Aragon, refused to even call Anne by name, slurring her as the concubine or worse. One hostile observer crudely dubbed her a goggle-eyed whore, implying her eyes protruded unnaturally. After Anne's death, Catholic propagandists took such gossip further. In 158 Gossip, Nicholas Sander, who never met Anne, famously portrayed her as a deformed seductress, rather tall of stature, with black hair and an oval face of sallow complexion, as if troubled with jaundice. She had a projecting tooth under her upper lip, and on her right hand 6 fingers. There was a large wen, wart, under her chin. Sander even claimed Anne would hide her supposed ugliness with high collars and long sleeves. Modern historians are deeply skeptical of Sander's account. It reads more like character assassination than fact, painting Anne with the monstrous features of a witch to fit the image of an evil enchantress. Indeed, no witness in Anne's lifetime mentions such deformities. The only physical oddity attested by those who knew her is a small extra nail on one finger. A minor blemish later exaggerated into that 6th finger legend. Balanced against hostile reports were those from friends and neutrals, which often emphasized Anne's charm. A French courtier, Lancelot de Carles, wrote that Anne's most alluring feature was her eyes, which she well knew how to use. Such was their power that many a man paid his allegiance. According to de Carles, Anne could entice conversation and flirtation with a single glance, hinting at the promise of hidden passion in her look. Others recalled her poise and style. The poet Thomas Wyatt, whose family knew Anne, admitted, "In beauty, she was to many inferior, but for behavior, manners, attire, and tongue, she excelled them all." Even accounts years later remembered Anne as magnetic. The French writer Brantôme reminisced that in her youth at the French court, Anne had been the fairest and most bewitching of all the lovely dames there. Perhaps rose-tinted praise in hindsight, but evidence that her personal allure left lasting impressions. Importantly, most contemporary descriptions, good or bad, agree on certain basics. Anne Boleyn had dark hair, dark eyes, and an olive-toned, sallow complexion. She was of average height, with a long, elegant neck. Her face was often described as oval-shaped, with a prominent nose and a reasonably slim build. These traits set her apart from the pale-skinned, fair-haired ideal of beauty in Tudor England. More on that shortly. To her admirers, Anne's looks were unconventional but compelling, complemented by style and vivacity. To her foes, those same features became fodder for insults, from witched black eyes to swarthy skin. In some, first-hand accounts portray Anne Boleyn as eye-catching and elegant, if not classically pretty, with an irresistible charisma that could enthrall or enrage observers in equal measure. Modern reconstructions, piecing together Anne's face. Because Henry VIII tried to erase Anne's memory after her fall, no confirmed contemporary portrait of Anne Boleyn survives today. We must rely on later images and a few precious clues from her lifetime. The sole, undisputed likeness made while Anne lived is a small lead portrait medal from 1534, inscribed, "The Most Happy, Anno 1534, which was likely created to celebrate a hoped-for pregnancy." In it, Anne is shown in profile, wearing a queen's gable hood and elaborate necklace. Unfortunately, time has worn away the medal's details. Anne's nose and eyes are blurred into oblivion. In recent years, historians and artists have tried to reconstruct Anne's appearance from these scraps. In 2012, sculptor Lucy Churchill painstakingly recreated the damaged 1534 medal, sculpting a detailed replica of Anne's face as it might have originally appeared. The result is striking. Churchill's reconstruction reveals a woman with a long oval face, high cheekbones, a sharp chin, and large, vigilant eyes, features that align with descriptions by Anne's contemporaries. Intriguingly, the reconstructed face bears a strong resemblance to later artworks believed to copy lost originals. For example, a miniature portrait by John Hoskins and an image hidden in Elizabeth Fern's locket ring both show a similarly long-faced, dark-eyed woman, thought to be Anne. This consistency gives some confidence that we are closing in on Anne's true likeness, a 16th century sketch by Hans Holbein, possibly depicting Anne Boleyn. Another clue is a chalk sketch by Hans Holbein, Henry VIII's court artist, of an unknown lady in the 1530s. The sketch shows a female figure in a gable hood with the French fashion of the day. Some experts, including Alison Weir, argue the sitter may be Anne Boleyn. She points out the woman has dark hair, large eyes, a long nose, and full sensual lips, matching Anne's known features. The sketch also depicts a slightly fuller face and less pointed chin than later paintings of Anne. If it is indeed Anne, it might capture a more realistic, softer look at her than the stylized posthumous portraits. However, the identification isn't certain. Holbein didn't label the drawing, and others think it could be a different court lady. Still, such sketches fuel fascinating debate and even digital reconstructions. Modern graphic artists have used Anne's portraits and Holbein's sketch as bases to create composite images of her. Through these efforts, Anne Boleyn's face emerges from the shadows, a strong-featured, intelligent visage with dark eyes that seem alive even in pencil strokes. Physical anthropology adds one more piece to the puzzle. In 1876, workmen renovating the Tower of London's St. Peter ad Vincula Chapel, where Anne was buried, claimed to have found her remains. A doctor examined the bones, though there's a slight chance they belonged to another executed lady, and reported the woman to be in her late 20s, of delicate build, with a small, fine-boned physique. She stood between 5 feet and 5 feet 3 inches tall, and notably had a short and slender neck, and small, tapering hands and feet. The skull's jaw was described as particularly small, perhaps indicating a pointed chin or narrow lower face. All these details align with what we suspect of Anne's appearance from paintings and descriptions. They reinforce that Anne was petite and elegant, with the long, graceful neck that observers like the Venetian ambassador noted in 1532. However, it's important to remember these bones were reburied without modern verification, so we can't be completely certain they were Anne's. No DNA tests or definitive facial reconstructions from a skull have been possible. Thus, modern reconstructions of Anne Boleyn's face rely on detective work, comparing historical descriptions, analyzing portraits painted decades after her death, and extrapolating from forensic clues. The consensus of this research portrays Anne as a slim, young woman with striking dark features. She likely had an oval face with a somewhat pointed chin, a straight long nose, and shining dark eyes under arched brows. Her complexion was olive or lightly tanned, unusual for an English rose of the era, and she had long, dark brown hair, often worn in lustrous cascades down her back. Crucially, nearly all attempts to capture Anne's looks agree on one thing: her expression and bearing conveyed confidence and charm. Any modern forensic image of Anne Boleyn would be incomplete without the lively spark that contemporaries saw in her eyes, the spark that no sculpture or software can fully reproduce. She introduced French fashions like the French hood, a sleek, rounded headpiece that contrasted with the traditional English gable hoods. Anne herself, however, was versatile. She was depicted wearing both styles on different occasions, always the consummate fashionista. She was also creative. She invented a hanging sleeve to hide a blemish on one hand and a high collar that hid a mark on her neck, writes historian Philippa Jones. If true, Anne cleverly turned potential flaws into bold fashion statements, inspiring other ladies to copy her long-sleeved gowns and jeweled collars. Even her enemies had to admit she had grace. Anne Boleyn arrived in an era with very specific ideals of female beauty. Tudor court beauties were typically fair-skinned with light or reddish hair, soft features, and curvy figures. Think of young Catherine of Aragon with her auburn hair and fair face, or Jane Seymour's pale, gentle looks. By those standards, Anne was almost the opposite. She was a brunette with a sallow, olive-toned complexion and a relatively slender, small-busted figure. In a time when a full, milk-white bosom was prized, Anne's chest was considered modest. Bosom not much raised, noted one observer. When pallid ivory skin was the fashion, Anne's skin had a warmer hue. One detractor sneered it was as if she had jaundice. Even Anne's beauty marks became talking points. Tiny moles on her body were magnified into signs of witchcraft by gossipers, and according to Anne's first biographer, George Wyatt, she had a pronounced neck anatomy, possibly a somewhat visible Adam's apple, that was uncommon in women. In short, Anne did not fit the conventional mold of Tudor loveliness, which made her stand out all the more. But if Anne defied the standard of beauty, she also helped redefine it, at least at Henry's court. What she lacked in classic Tudor looks, she more than made up for in style, sophistication, and demeanor. Anne had spent her formative years in the French court, polishing her manners and fashion sense. When she returned to England, she quickly became a trendsetter. One chronicler noted that Anne dressed well and had become a lead one court observer remarked that, for behavior, manners, and tongue, she excelled them all. In other words, Anne's cultivated elegance and witty conversation made the demure beauties of the court seem bland by comparison. Commoners and the old guard nobility, however, were less charmed. To many in England, Anne was the upstart who displaced the beloved Queen Catherine. Rumors painted her as an unscrupulous seductress who used her French tricks to entrap the king. Some churchmen even implied she must have bewitched Henry to make him abandon a virtuous wife. Slanderous descriptions of Anne as a witch or devil circulated, seizing on her unusual looks as evidence. The extra finger, the mole, the dark complexion, all became symbols of an ungodly woman in propaganda. At court, those who opposed the Boleyn faction would snidely comment that Anne's appearance was a disgrace. Catherine of Aragon herself, when asked to hand over her crown jewels to Anne, coldly refused, calling Anne the scandal of Christendom, and implying her unworthiness. Clearly, Anne's reputation suffered under a barrage of criticism that intertwined her looks with moral judgments. Her flashy fashion and flirtatious manner were shocking to traditionalists who preferred the model of a modest, fair, chaste queen. Thus, at the Tudor court, Anne Boleyn's appearance was polarizing, adored by those who found her chic and vivacious, despised by those who saw her as provocative or alien. Yet, by the height of Anne's influence, early 1530, her style had become the new vogue. Women at court reportedly imitated Anne's French gowns and headdresses. Pale-skinned ladies perhaps even experimented with slightly darker powders to mimic Anne's complexion. Some historians theorize this, though evidence is scant. Anne's confident embrace of her unique beauty sent a message that allure was more than skin deep. Indeed, contemporary admirers emphasize intangible qualities: her quick wit, mysterious sexual magnetism, and charming, sophisticated air. These were the qualities that won Henry's heart and reshaped the court's perception of attractiveness, at least while Anne's star was rising. She proved that a brunette with a heavy mane of glossy black hair could outshine the fairest blondes in the realm if she carried herself with enough confidence and charisma.